Hola a todas y a todos, mi nombre es Ricardo Lillo, soy el director del Laboratorio de Justicia centrada en las personas de la UAI y es mi más absoluto placer presentarles a nuestra invitada del día de hoy. Ella es Katherine Forrest. Katherine es una ex jueza federal del Distrito Sur de Nueva York, que es además ex fiscal general adjunta en la División Antimonopolio del Departamento de Justicia de los Estados Unidos. En la actualidad es socia del estudio Paul Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton and Garrison. Yes. Y bueno, el día de hoy vamos a estar hablando en base a su enorme experiencia en el uso de inteligencia artificial desde el punto de vista del ejercicio de la jurisdicción y su trabajo y su experiencia en el entrenamiento de jueces y juezas en materia de utilización de inteligencia artificial. Así que vamos a estar haciendo esta pequeña entrevista con ella, preguntándole sobre sus conocimientos y sobre sus experiencias en la materia. Para eso voy a cambiar al inglés, porque así va a ser más fácil después hacer la traducción. Pues solamente quería entonces presentarles a nuestra invitada del día de hoy, que es además autora de un libro que es absolutamente fundamental en esta materia, que se llama When Machines Can Be Judge, Jury and Executioner, Justice in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. Y vamos a estar conversando un poquito también sobre su libro, el cual viene a presentar aquí a Chile y a conversar un poquito con nosotras y nosotros. Así que, bueno, I will switch to English now. Thank you so much, Katherine, for being here, for traveling so far away from your home. I know it's been a long trip, so thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. And Santiago is an extraordinarily beautiful place, and so I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm glad you like it. We were able to walk a little bit. This morning we went to the Supreme Court of Justice here in Chile, and we had the opportunity to visit a little bit, so it's great to have you here, Katherine. So let's dive directly into our topic, right? Before going to my formal questions, I would like to ask you if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself, about your experience, of what are you been working on these days, and then we can dive into the questions that I have here.
Yeah, and so I have been working in the area of AI now for almost 6 years, and so before ChatGPT hit the sort of consciousness of the entire world in 2020, late 2022, early 2023, I was already working in the area of AI. I'd started when I was a judge in the district court in the Southern District of New York, which is the Manhattan court, working on some AI projects, and gave a lecture to the U.S. Copyright Society on AI and intellectual property issues, and then continued my work on AI. So I really delved into working in the financial services segment, in the insurance segment, in telecommunications, in big platform companies, as well as various kinds of media companies. My initial focus was on algorithmic bias, which I know we'll talk a little bit about today. And my subsequent focus has been on a lot of ethical areas with AI. One of them has to do with VR, virtual reality, and augmented reality and AI. And that's in a book called Is Justice Real When Reality Is Not? And then I've got another book coming out that's called Of Another Mind, which is about cognitive awareness of AI. So my focus right now, I would say, is still AI. 90% of my world is AI, but it's now expanded beyond the algorithmic bias and criminal justice focus that we'll talk about today, and gone into a broader array of ethical areas for AI.
Okay, that is great. We can I think look into each of these areas. It will be wonderful. Judicial systems usually are behind any other areas like of the development of knowledge of technologies usually are not there, like in the top of the waves. You can say that, we can say that. But in New York, in Manhattan, we have been talking about a little bit about the very different systems that have been in use. So in the judicial systems, what will be the main uses that AI finds?
I'm going to break that actually into a couple of different pieces. First, I want to take the judicial system and back it up a little bit to what happens to make a case. Because AI has actually been in use by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, various law enforcement authorities, not only in the United States, but of course worldwide for some time, to track very sophisticated money laundering activities through machine learning tools, using different kinds of video surveillance, and even early facial recognition tools. So those tools were in place, and they started to become increasingly used in a way that hit the courtroom sometime in around about, I'd say, 2011, 2012. There was also a period of time after 9/11 when New York City actually partnered with Microsoft in the development of a tool called the Domain Awareness System, which is a very sophisticated machine learning tool that compiles a variety of different kinds of data to track people of interest, to try and detect crime, deter crime, et cetera, et cetera. When you get into the courtroom itself, judges across the country have had access now to a variety of different types of machine learning tools since about between 2012, 13, 14, and up to the present that have assisted them with a variety of tasks. But the one that I'll focus on for the moment are issues relating to civil liberties and liberty-based decisions for criminal defendants. So, for instance, there are machine learning tools that will predict recidivism, which is the likelihood that an individual will repeat a crime or engage in criminal behavior, or to predict whether or not an individual is likely to commit a violent act, whether or not an individual is likely to comply with bail terms that may require that individual to return to court and to do various things or not do various things that the court requires while out on bail. And that also can help a judge come up with what will be an appropriate sentence to fulfill a particular theory of justice, such as retribution or rehabilitation, for instance.
But why a judge will require the use of this kind of tools? What makes it necessary?
You know, it's not for ever since we've had criminals and judges, have been judging criminals and dispensing sentences, which is sometime after the caveman, but people have been committing crimes since from the stealing of the apple from the tree, right? Or at least undesired behavior. We've had human beings who've sat in judgment on other human beings, and there's always been a desire to have something more than just human gut judgment help inform these very important liberty-based decisions.
The key is better information.
And to really, to give them something concrete to hold on to say, I'm about to put you in jail, take away your liberty. What can I rely on that is more than just, I really just don't think you're going to comply with your bail terms, or you're giving me a bad feeling. I'm really afraid that you're going to commit another crime. Is there something more tangible than that? And that's really what gave birth to the early concepts of what are called risk assessment tools. And those tools started off without AI and then developed increasingly sophisticated capabilities.
Yeah. Let me delve into that for our viewers that perhaps are not aware of what is these risk assessment tools. Can you explain a little bit how they work?
Sure. So a risk assessment tool is actually a sophisticated software program that is doing exactly what the words say. It's assessing risk. Mm-hmm. And in terms of machine learning and in terms of its AI capabilities, what it's doing is it's using a lot of data based upon a chosen data set. So let's just call it a 10-year data set of arrestees. That's an actual tool that I know of uses that kind of data set. And it uses that data to assess patterns. Because what artificial intelligence does is assess patterns in data. It then, based upon the patterns in the data, it actually then predicts behavior of the data set. This is what was most likely to have caused individuals to commit crimes or to have recidivated or to have committed violence. This is second most likely. This is a contributing factor. This is yet another factor. It comes up with a series of factors that we call inputs. You then take a real person who's got, they'll have filled out a profile or have had an interview, and that real human being will then have their information, his or her information, fed into the tool, and the tool will then predict various kinds of actions and behavior for that individual, that one person, based upon the pattern of what the tool understands to be the most likely characteristics for recidivism, violence, etc.
Yeah.
So it's a predictive tool.
Yeah. In your book, you make an excellent argument about the theories of justice that are behind this kind of tools, and you argue that they are based on an utilitarian way of see justice, right? And you call for a more fairness approach for the use of these tools. Can you explain a little bit, because I think it's fascinating, this idea?
Yeah, and it flows directly from the point that we just mentioned, which was when you're predicting patterns for one person based upon a data set that really encompasses perhaps tens of thousands of other individuals, you're dealing with a situation where the majority of data points, which are other people's data points, that majority is actually determining the output, the answer, the prediction for the one person, for the minority. And that corresponds most closely with a utilitarian form of justice, where the majority is what you prioritize over the minority, and therefore you look for what will make the majority have the highest welfare, even at the expense of the minority. So my argument in the book is that when you're using AI based upon predictions from large data sets about what the majority would do, even if there are individual characteristics in that one person, they're not going to be enough to offset that majority. So that's utilitarianism. Yeah. And that's in contrast to the concept of individual liberties, individual due process, individual assessment of just that one person's likelihood of recidivism, or that one person's likelihood to commit violence. Of course, it's embedded in that overall assessment tool someplace, but in fact, the majority is driving the answer. So in my view, fairness is different from the accurate use of the tool. The tool can be behaving accurately. It can actually take that person's information and run it accurately through the tool, but it might not be fair to that one individual. Yeah. So you have to balance then the fairness, the utilitarianism, the accuracy.
Nice. It's amazing. But let me go now to more like down-to-earth kind of arguments, because I think that's a key point. I think I really believe that's super important. But also there are other challenges, much more practical. First one is, but are they accurate? Or are there any accuracy problems there with these systems? And another practical problem, those who are using these tools are humans. Are those humans, our judges, or in your case, right, in New York, were they prepared for use these tools? And how was the process of learning how to use those?
Those are great questions. And so let's talk about accuracy or inaccuracy first. So as we've said, the tools can work accurately, but be unfair. But they can also work inaccurately. And we know from what is called validation, which is the technical term for testing these tools, that the validation of these tools puts their accuracy rate at somewhere between, say, 68% and 80% or 78%, depending upon when the tool was most recently tested. And by the way, I should say, there are multiple tools of this type. There's not just one risk assessment tool. There are actually more than a dozen risk assessment tools. And so you're dealing with a situation where even the most accurate risk assessment tools have a known inaccuracy rate of, say, 20 to 22%. But that inaccuracy rate can be as high as in the 30s. So you've got a known inaccuracy rate before you even get to the questions of fairness. So that's a real, I think, issue. Some people would argue, well, human beings are making the decisions if the machine is not giving them a prediction, and are humans any better? Perhaps certain humans are as good as the tools, and maybe certain humans are not. And maybe there's a few that are better. But humans are not also 100% accurate. So we've got that to contend with. Your second question was a very important one, which is training. And one thing I should say is I was a federal judge when I was on the bench. In the federal system, there's only a post-conviction tool that's used called PICRA, the post-conviction risk assessment tool. And so we didn't use the tools that are relating to bail or to recidivism or to predicting violence early on. Those are used in the state court system. So one thing that I think has been so critical to do is to train the judges on, one, the fact that these tools do have this inaccuracy rate, and two, that the tools are taking into consideration the majority and not that one individual, so that the judge ultimately understands that these tools are perhaps some form of evidence-based decision-making, but they should not be exchanged for the very critical importance of human judgment.
Yeah. So why will we be using this? What are the benefits that for or should we ban the use of AI?
You know, I've said to people that even though I've talked about the utilitarianism compared to certain kinds of civil and personal liberties, the fact that I've talked about inaccuracy versus fairness, I think that there is such use of these tools ubiquitously now in the court systems throughout the United States that it's not going away. So I don't think banning these tools is an option. The real work that needs to be done is the training of the judges to ensure that we've actually got judges who understand that they're using a tool that is not a crystal ball on the actual behavior of an actual person, that the tool is a tool to be used as one point of reference. And so I don't think we should be banning them. I think that they can be made even better and more useful and more efficient as we start to improve our data sets. So right now, for instance, some of the data sets that are being used with these tools are data sets that are reflective of, for instance, certain kinds of potential algorithmic bias. Maybe there's an overrepresentation of a particular age group or a particular racial category, any number of things. And those data issues are being closely worked on right now by a number of people across the country. And I, for one, am optimistic that it'll be able to be resolved and the tools will become even better.
So do you think that this, the black box problem that is so spread in the public opinion, do you think it's getting better? Do you think we will have a solution for the black box? Or do you think that there is no way we will solve this?
Okay, well, I actually think the black box is getting worse. So while I'm saying and making an argument or a pitch right now for the fact that I think these tools will in fact be better in the future, I think that the way that we're going to be able to test the tools for how much better they are or are not is based on the output. We're going to actually have to measure the tools against output to see if there's any kind of disparate impact.
How good they are.
What's that?
How good they are.
How good they are. That's right. In terms of black box, today the tools are even more opaque than they used to be. I mean, to the extent that the box existed at the beginning when people understood what was the data that went into it, what was the algorithm that went into it. Right. Now we're dealing with a neural network.
Yes.
And the box is dark and it's like
impossible to tackle.
Impossible. It's got like tree roots growing through it, and no one's ever really going to figure out exactly how things work. We're going to have to look at the output.
My next questions were directed to that point. One thing is machine learning, like risk assessment tools, which were more, I don't know if the word is basic, but they weren't as complex as the kind of tools that we see today in terms of AI. Yeah, can you let us know or tell us a little bit more about the current stage of affairs? What is going on?
Right. So the tools that we've been talking about so far are what I would call narrow AI. They're tools that were actually designed with an algorithm and on a specialized data set that are designed for one kind of task or one limited set of tasks and what we've been talking about related to criminal justice. Today, generative AI, which is what's behind ChatGPT, Bing Chat, Claude, Llama, any number of these large language models, those tools are vastly more complicated, and they are in the area of what's called broad AI. They're multidimensional, they can do multiple tasks, they take lots of different kinds of information all in at the same time and layer it on top of each other, and are able then to create all kinds of very complex connections. So generative AI today will be able to take those tools that we were talking about, and it will be able, with additional what we call fine-tuning, which is taking and putting an additional layer on top of that large language model and actually help to improve the output and the accuracy of those tools. So it makes it far more complicated. The black box problem gets worse, but the tools are going to be more sophisticated, and we hope we'll be able to bring additional advantages. I'm still worried about them, but I've got some hope.
So do you think a solution would be to have a list of these of the tools that are being used and tested, like by official institutions or public institutions in charge of or dealing with this?
Yes, I think that how one is going to regulate these kinds of tools that are being used in the criminal justice system is a really complicated question, but one that absolutely needs to be answered, because you're dealing with liberty. You're dealing with putting somebody behind bars or keeping somebody behind bars for a period of time. It's one of the very most important decisions that we as a society actually make. So I think that those tools should be regulated. There ought to be parameters around what kinds of data sets are appropriate data sets. There ought to be a national, international, worldwide conversation on what is fair, what constitutes fair, what kind of accuracy rate is acceptable, what kind of accuracy rate is not acceptable.
But as there are many different AI systems as well, there are many different ethical frameworks, right? Perhaps people in Chile do not have the same ideas or principles that in the US. How do we get along and how we have a single common ethical guidelines for AI? What do you think?
Well, that's an incredibly important question, because I don't believe that there's sort of a universal morality, and there's certainly no universal culture that we all abide by. We know for a fact that all over the world, different things are considered crimes. What might be a crime in one place may not be a crime in another place. Or how much of a crime, how serious a crime something is, can change. So I think that what we need to do is think about what are the guidelines in terms of safety mitigations that we would put in place, And then the data, though, I think is specific to the particular geographic or cultural area. For instance, you would not use a data set made up of New York City crimes or Iowa crimes in Chile. You might have had a huge opioid epidemic in a particular area that actually caused a spike in criminal behavior in the United States that may not have occurred in Santiago.
Yeah.
Or it may have been a different drug of choice in Santiago that was not being the hot drug in the United States. The United States is now, much of it in the States, legalized cannabis. So we've got lots of differences. So the way to account for those is to ensure that the data sets are culturally specific and appropriate. But I do think that we can say 80% accuracy is sort of a minimum that we accept or 85% accuracy is a minimum that of guidelines from the United Nations or from some other human rights organization. And then when we're trying to figure out, what is fair, that's going to be a culturally specific, I think, question.
So AI, I'm sure at this point, it's not going anywhere. It will continue among us. In fact, what you're saying is that in the future, it's getting much and more complex, right? More difficult to assess. So the last developments made you more worried about the possibility that AI will replace the figure of a judge, or do you think it's do you don't think that is still a possible outcome?
Well, I think that right now there are a number of tasks that both judges and lawyers do where an accurate AI can do them faster and perhaps even better than the humans need to do them. But I think there are certain things that cannot be replaced. So let me give you some examples. In terms of judging or sentencing a human being to jail time, I think that we can use those tools that we've just been talking about as input. But I ultimately think that we sentence human beings to jail because they have violated laws designed by humans that you and I were just talking about as culturally specific, culturally human. How we deem them to be serious or not serious is specifically human, and what we think of as punishment to the corporeal self, to the human physical body, putting it behind bars or not putting it behind bars is very human. So I think sentencing is not something that I want anything other than a human to be deeply involved in. But I do think, for instance, if there are small claims that are small dollar amount civil actions where it's just a small dispute about a tenant being able to get back a deposit from a landlord, or a small debt dispute about somebody hit your car and they won't pay for the bumper, or something like that, where there have got to be efficiencies we can gain from different kinds of tools that will be able to take in the right information. There's not much that needs to happen in terms of great brain power. The AI can certainly do it as well, maybe better and certainly faster than we can. And I think that's a great place to use those tools.
Well, time flies, and I do have like 100 questions, but I would like to finish with two. And the first one is just related to what we're saying. What is the potential of AI to improve access to justice to regular people?
Well, I think that one of the great benefits for AI and the law is going to be access to justice. And I would put it in terms of a couple of things. First, we know that legal documents can be very incomprehensible to smart people, even those with educations, but also those without educations, who just can't understand the legal language, the legalese that gets used. AI will be able to translate those, not into a different language, but into your own language in a way that will then make them comprehensible. So you'll be able to upload a document, and say, what does this document mean that I must do and by when? And by the way, can you help me draft whatever the document is? So understanding and navigating the legal system is going to be a huge plus for access to justice. The second piece is going to be actually drafting documents and doing research. A lot of people don't know what their rights are or think they have rights when they don't have rights and waste a lot of the court's time. And what they can do now with AI is put their story, their narrative into the AI tool and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what happened to me, for instance, at work. Do I have a claim? And under the particular legal structure in place in that individual's home country, home geography, the tool will be able to then say yes, no, and be able to spit out an answer. I should caution that the AI tools as they exist today
They make mistakes.
They still have what we call hallucinations. And so you've got to be and approach these things. You've got to be careful. You've got to approach these things with care. And so we are at the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of this AI revolution. And so we're going to be seeing great advancements in the next few years.
So, and that goes directly to my last question, because everything is going so fast, right? But there is people today in the law schools, like they want to be a lawyer, or perhaps they are looking to be a judge. We are training judges today. What would be your message for those people?
My message is, don't be afraid of these tools, embrace these tools. These tools are not going away. These tools are going to be used throughout not only our legal system, but our society. And if you're a lawyer, you're going to have clients who are relying upon artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is going to give rise to a large number of legal claims. You're going to need to be conversant in those kinds of concepts. It doesn't mean that you have to be highly technical, but it means you've got to be brave and not afraid. So I would say, learn how to use the tools. Learn how to understand whether or not what you're getting out of the tool is useful or not. How it can help you draft, how it can help you ask the right questions of yourself when you're about to go do an important argument. So I would tell young lawyers, don't be discouraged by the fact that AI can do a number of things, but be encouraged and be brave.
Katherine, thank you so much for being with us here today. It was fascinating to have this conversation with you. Let me change to hablar en español ahora, para agradecerle a todas las personas que vean este video, este registro, y quiero cerrar simplemente invitándoles a que sigan las actividades de nuestro Laboratorio de Justicia centrada en las personas, de la Facultad de Derecho de la Universidad Adolfo Ibáñez. En este tipo de actividades que además hemos desarrollado junto a nuestros grandes socios de Estado Diario, a quienes por supuesto agradecemos muchísimo por toda su ayuda y empuje. Así que eso, muchísimas gracias y nos vemos en una próxima entrevista.